My name is Daniela Rivera. I first want to thank you all for being here. I'm sort of like starting my first 2 years as a studio director in the art department. And I just first of all want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested in the arts. And after introducing myself, I'll ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we'll start the conversation. So I'm Daniela Rivera from Chile. Hard accent, get excited about art, so I always tell my students to please raise their hand when I'm speaking too fast. So if I do that too and you're not understanding, do raise your hand. That's going to be fine. And I'm in the studio part of the department. I work with students in painting, drawing, architecture, and so many other things as you're going to see.
Hi, I'm Alice Friedman. I am one of the co-directors of the architecture program with Daniela and Martha McNamara's in the back, and Andy Mowbray, and I'm the McNeil Professor of the History of American Art. So I teach architectural history in the art department. We'll be talking more about that in a bit.
Hi, I'm Marty Brody. I teach in the music department, and I have had the privilege of being here at Wellesley for 36 years. I hope it won't be an embarrassment to say to my colleague on my right that we've been together all that time here, and it's been a
it's not a problem.
And it's been a wonderful time, in particular, working with Alice and really with everybody at the college. And all four of us, for different amounts of time, have been working very, very closely on the project that has created that construction site behind us, which is very exciting for us. And for a couple of years, I served as the client lead for that project with Kieran Timberlake, the architect that we worked with, who we had a wonderful time working with. And now Phyllis has taken over in that role. And we've been working so closely all along that I hope and think there's a lot of continuity, but I'm very grateful to Phyllis also for picking up the mantle now and carrying things forward in this incredibly exciting project.
Hi, I am Phyllis, and I'm so pleased to be here. It's such an exciting time, and I'm really pleased to have you here to share it with us as we're watching Pendleton West really be transformed. So I am a professor of studio art. I teach printmaking and drawing, and have worked really closely with all of my colleagues here. I'm really pleased and excited to have Daniela on board, newly tenured and working so hard on behalf of the department in so many ways. So it's really exciting to be at this point, looking at students who are first years and second years who are going to be graduating from this new building. And so we'd like to share some of our ideas behind the scenes with you. We know that some of you in the audience have seen some of these images before and have imagined with us what can happen, but we're giving you a bit of an update and giving you a sense of how we're looking ahead at this point. So thank you for being here. Daniela.
Okay, so I am going to start by showing you some student work, things that have been happening and things that have actually sort of forced us to rethink ourselves and rethink how we're going to teach arts at Wellesley. So I'm going to start with the first one, and I think I'm going to do it right.
Good,
yes, but now I have to stand up.
There you go.
So that's by our student 1-1 Faye, who started as an architecture major, switching to studio art, is applying to grad school in architecture, and is also a musician. And these are pieces that she did for an independent study in painting. And what I like about this piece, and I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to share it with you, is that it brings all of the disciplines together. And she just gave me this video yesterday to share with you. And that shows also a little bit of how we're thinking about teaching our students and how flexible they've been in going from one discipline to the other and forcing us to move that way as well. I'm going to show you. So this is 1-1 again, and this is all Pendleton West, the last semester that we were using it as a teaching space. And we were able to teach a seminar for advanced students and architecture students that allow us to actually deal with the building itself as raw material for art making. And this is one of the pieces that was done where the hallways were sort of taken apart into pieces, replicating the structure of the exterior of the building into the interior of the building and giving us a sense of what the space was going to be in the future. Because as Phyllis is going to show you later, we're thinking of this ground floor as a floor that is going to be completely open, where all the 2D disciplines are going to be integrated. It was an interesting test run, actually. This is another project that I wanted to share. It's also about old Pendleton. This is furniture that was found in Pendleton, was there before Pendleton was a studio space, was a chemistry space. And this architecture student used the drawers of the furniture almost as a Donald Judd piece, but intervened them with photographs of the building. And I have to stand again, I'm sorry. To show us the, thank you. To show us the vertical transit through Pendleton West. And excuse the video, but that's me videoing with my phone. That's a short one. And this was a show that we did with that course in sort of in memory of Pendleton West. And the piece that you're seeing to your right, it's all walls of the Pendleton West building. And I don't know if you remember the bridge that connected Jewett with Pendleton West, but there was a beautiful tree growing there that we couldn't preserve. It was too young to preserve, but the student loved that view constantly, and it was sort of the bridge in between the two buildings. She actually took some branches, burned them in the pit that is by the Lulu, transforming them into charcoal, and that's how she drew the portrait of the building in the all walls of the building. And finally, these are other sort of intermediate shows, and we have here a seminar, an advanced drawing seminar, using all different types of things to draw. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this because everything started from a project that I designed after my first year at Wellesley, because I thought that students here were extremely bright, very used to following directions to succeed, and I needed to engineer a project that would make them fail. And of course, Wellesley student proved me wrong. So I designed this project where I sent them out to collect 100 marks. And I made them read a text that Benjamin wrote that makes a difference in between sign marks and traces. Beautiful text, super short, but very dense. And we were talking about it, having these philosophical discussions about what is the difference in between these things, and I sent them, okay, and I gave them many rules to collect these marks. They had to be in a specific geographic location. They had to be collected all in the same way consistently, so it was digital photo, it was rubbing of the whatever mark, trace, or sign that they decide to do, or by narratives describing the little marks or whatever. They did it, and then when they brought them back to the studio, I asked them to create what I call the mark making scape, so sort of like space made out of the combination or iteration of these marks. I was sure this was not going to work. I tried it, and I knew that this was not going to work, but actually they proved me wrong. And they proved me so wrong that one of our students, Margarets Story, is working today in her own company. She just graduated 2 years ago, and she used that course and that exercise as one of the things that connected her sort of art practice to now her architecture practice in planning. So she said to me that going out and collecting these marks and being able to use them later as a visual way of narrating something gave her the ability to now go out and collect data to be able to tell stories to her clients and formulate projects that are going to completely change the way they live in spaces or they use the spaces. This was her first reaction to that project. And excuse me for everybody that is dealing with sports here, and I'm going to say what we did. We are the major infractors when it came to facilities in the art department, and I'm really sorry about that. But she took charcoal to the squash courts, and she wallpapered them with paper. She was a squash player, and then she played squash. And every time the ball impacted the walls, having been wrapped with the charcoal, created these beautiful marks and started creating this incredible space. And then when there were too many impacts, they would rip the paper and create another sort of mark. And this was a massive piece. And that's what started her collecting data and brought her to collect data of her own body, traces of her body in her pillow, and these were all plaster pieces, or traces of her body in a bed. It's a beautiful plaster sculpture, and creating drawings that way. And so now she's doing it in the architecture field, which I think is a beautiful connection of what art can do, even if you're not going to become an artist, if you're going to use these for other disciplines or in other, in anything. Sorry, that was not very articulate of my part, but this is another seminar exhibition. This was called Simulation in the History of Representation, and we were questioning how it was seen through centuries. And students work in all different sorts of media, which actually forced me to start learning about printing, color printing in photography, how to keep cactuses alive in a chair or other things. So to be quite honest, the one that ends up learning the most, it's me, and that's thanks to the students. But all of these mediums are happening in the same course, and the discussion are going around the same, all of these pieces, the discussion is happening in the same environment. And that actually forces us to think about how we're teaching and how we're connecting all of these things. So not to isolate the disciplines, but to start creating more fluidity among them. And that's the beautiful group of simulation in the history of representation. And I think that's all I have to say.
Some of the things that happen here in the studio program and throughout the arts at Wellesley. Some of you have fond memories of the Wellesley method and the importance of having a connection with materials and the history of art. And I thought I'd bring in a couple very recent images of a visiting artist presentation we had by Keiji Shinahara in the print studio, and you can see he's showing the ukiyo-e method of traditional Japanese water-based printing to an avid group of students, media arts majors and classics majors, I see there, one budding studio major. And on the right-hand side here, I also thought it'd be nice to remind ourselves that our students are really going out, even as they are working in the arts, they're taking some of their ideas out to other places as well. So the student here, Kate Hunt, is presenting work at a national printmaking conference. This one happened to take place in Knoxville, Tennessee, and she's showing her work there and interacting with artists there. So we took both of our thesis students who were active in prints last year. So this dynamic of forming a community, being connected to artists that are in the field, being connected to the traditions of the field is really important to us as we continue to make changes and revisions to the studio curriculum. This course, we're getting a little glimpse here of some students. These are first-year students in the Word and Image studio course. It's a writing program course taught in studio arts, and they are collaborating in the Book Arts Lab. The Book Arts Lab has become the site temporarily of all the printmaking for the next 3 semesters. And the Jewett Gallery, which you saw Daniela show some images of the Jewett Gallery just previously, that's actually our drawing studio. Carlos Dorian is teaching an intro drawing class in there as we speak. So we're making adaptions this year, but we're still keeping a very active and lively exchange going with our changing landscape. So speaking of this landscape and all the changes that we envision, some of these images are familiar to some of you in the audience, but here we are on the quad, looking through the eyes of Kieran Timberlake, our architects who we're very happy with the work that we've been doing with them. You're getting a glimpse here now of the, I wonder if I can point this to, here's the addition to Pendleton West, forming a new link between Jewett and Pendleton West. We also have a new doorway here. We'll see that on the plans coming up. And you'll see a walkway stretching across that flat roof, which is now a roof garden. So there are many wonderful images of this. I have only a few to show you today. Mostly I want to invite you to questions afterwards that we can talk more about this transformation. But let's step through a few of the specifics and then we can follow up with our conversations. One is that students have been part of this transformation from the beginning. There are students who are currently in the architecture program at Harvard who were on the committee in the very beginning in the space planning, setting the agenda for some of the needs that we have in this newly transformed Pendleton West. But current students have had the opportunity to see the renovation close up. They've been inside. You see a student group with Vaso Mathis, our project manager, getting a look. They're actually standing in what will be the new printmaking studio, looking across to some of the new media areas there. And you're also seeing a glimpse of the former drawing studio, which is about to become the lighting studio, all opened up for the first time. So that's very exciting to see what this building is capable of, see it in its bones right now. It's been very important to us right from the beginning that we take this on in a sustainable way. And we know that an art building of all the different kinds of systems that happen in it is a very, it's a heavy use kind of building. Our assumptions have been that we're going to track LEED Gold. We've done a lot. Even as we moved out, we tried to retain and reuse as much as possible. So this has been a collective effort to make sure that everything possible can be transformed and reused as we're working. Some of you will be especially happy, I think, to hear that we're making some changes so that, again, this does look very stretched out to me, not quite as wide as here, but College Road, which we now see some very big letter, some type explaining the gates of this construction site right now are actually festooned with many elaborate words. But when we're finished, the soil that's been taken away from this space here and where the addition is going, some of that soil is temporarily parked over on the golf course, and it's coming back. It's going to make a new landscape here, and it's going to allow us to let people off at the Davis parking lot or at a space up here. And if one is in a wheelchair, for example, it's possible to move right into the addition, go into an elevator, and go straight into Jewett, into Pendleton West, and connect. So it's, for the first time, the quad is accessible to everyone. It makes it a much more publicly accessible kind of space. And this new landscape is going to continue the woodland veil all the way across. So we're excited about what this is going to look like. It looks pretty crazy right now, but it's a beautiful plan. We brought in the campus landscape architect for that, of course. So you can get a sense here that the same kind of plantings are all being carefully considered, and we have really a whole new kind of rise here. That very, very steep way is now going to be much more accessible. So it's very important to us to make sure that as we move through the building that we're going to honor the outside, the traditional parts of Pendleton. We're going to have even more of a view of that west-facing facade, but we have a lot of brand new modern inside looking to the outside. This is a view to the North Terrace. Underneath that is a wonderful new media classroom that will face directly out to the campus road. So this conversation as we move through spaces that are going to be lit in all new ways is going to be quite wonderful. But we also are we've taken a lot of emphasis on trying to understand the way the lighting moves in the building and preserving, say, the north-facing light for processes that really need that kind of light, like the painting studio, for example. As we look at the quad level, as Daniela was mentioning, we now have, back for a moment. We now have a whole different kind of circulation through here. We've taken the hallway, which was here, is now going to become a studio support area, so we have spray booths and storage and that sort of thing, but we circulate through them and are able to isolate certain things like drawing into a more private kind of area. So I know I want to make sure that there's time for Marty to explain some of the connections here, so I'm going to step through a few of these a little quicker, but just give you a glimpse of some of the early renderings that we have as we imagine some of the activities in these spaces. here we are down on the ground level, and I wanted to point out here just a couple things because I get so many questions about it. One is that yes, indeed, we are really expanding sculpture in a whole new way. And we've got our Brown's Foundry right here. We have a tech office with windows facing out to the hand tools, the metal shops, into the wood shops. So this is going to be a really wonderful expansion of our sculpture area. And also we've been able to keep paper making and screen print, sorry about the text there, but paper making and our connection to the Book Arts Lab is going to be stronger than ever. So we're very excited about that opportunity as well. So this downstairs area, here's that space that we were just looking at earlier, the earlier rendering of inside and outside. This is a very modern, new addition, and basically the shell of Pendleton West remains, but the whole inside is really designed to work for the kinds of processes that we envision doing now. And I think at this point, on the top floor, of course, I could go on and on about this wonderful new print shop, printmaking studio. Right here, but I'm especially excited about the fact that digital printing and photo and the lighting studio are all going to be connected now. So we have an opportunity for things to be integrated in a whole new kind of way. And I think with that, I'm going to hand it off to Marty. It's never been quite 1-2, but it's, but I think this is time for Marty to kind of explain some of what's going to be happening in the addition.
Thanks, Phyllis. I think just to say a couple general things and then talk in a little bit more detail. And these are themes that both Daniela and Phyllis have already mentioned, but as we've been working on this project for the Pendleton West transformation and thinking about its relationship to this new addition that we'll talk about a little bit more, and how it relates to this building that's here, I think one of the things that has happened that we are finding ourselves thinking about very intently is that conservation and transformation are not opposed to each other. That they're actually, if this is all going to work right, what we want to do in the arts now is to transform everything and to conserve everything, and that's actually entirely possible. And anything less than that would be less than what this college deserves. And that's true about the disciplines as well. We're thinking in new ways about the relationship between performance, and when Daniela showed us that slide of Marguerite Dumont, or Soumont, sorry, who did the thing in the squash court there, I thought, well, this is another form of performance, right? As well as this trace that comes there. And the first image that we had, with the moving one, where we have the Bach with and the detuning of that, by the way. There are all sorts of really wonderful things that happen there in the electronic medium. Again, something in its way conservative and also completely transformative. So it's happening in the curriculum, it's happening in the way we think about the buildings, and it is also a situation where we're thinking about integrating all of the different activities, the historical, the critical, the creative, and the performative, and at the same time trying to actually have the spaces for things where something very specialized that needs to be a specialized space actually has exactly the tools that are necessary, and also an environmentally healthy and safe environment. So it's a lot. It's been a really wonderful thing to be thinking about for these last few years. And I think that in terms of, well, let's take a little bit look at this floor plan here. Phyllis mentioned something very important about this, which is this is going to be a beautiful, beautiful site for printmaking and really in exquisite detail, something that Phyllis has thought through, so that we're going to have something in that printmaking area that really is going to be fabulous. And it's directly across from something that we actually were afraid we would not be able to get into this program, which is a kind of integrative area for new media. There's a flex media classroom there. There are a series of digital editing areas. There's a sound control room where you're going to be able to, students will be able to actually, and we have very few places for this on campus now, where they can actually record the human voice and do voiceovers for films. And students are doing films across the curriculum now. And when they use their own voices to narrate what's going on in the films, this is going to be one of the few perfect places. It's going to be the perfect place, the one and only perfect place for them to do that kind of recording. So, and it's there with the lighting studio where digital photography and filmmaking will be happening. And a point I'll make now, but I'll come back to, all of this will be wired together with the new performance spaces that are essentially music spaces. But they're also going to be, because of that, spaces for film production, spaces for video production, and connected with all the new media activities. So we have very particularly designed spaces for particular functions, but they also are meant to have a transformative effect on the work that every student is doing who is working in these spaces. That big arrow that's down there is showing a green roof, but just above that you'll see a long passageway which goes into the new addition. And that is going to be an incredibly beautiful spot. It's actually one of the higher spots on campus, and it will be glass on both sides. So this is maybe a slightly retrograde kind of joke, but I have often thought that there are going to be many marriage proposals up there. And that this is going to be a place, or great thoughts, a place to go. Take your exactly.
Great thoughts.
Right. Anyway, this is going to be a place for exciting things to happen as you go back and forth between Pendleton and the new addition. So there's a physical link. There will be electronic links, which for many of us are as exciting as the physical links. And it's going to be really a quite beautiful way of exposing, the campus and views of the campus. Another very exciting thing, now we're looking at a rendering of kind of arts passageway, and where you're headed, of course, is into the academic quad. This is the opposite side from what Phyllis showed, the view from the academic quad. Now we're moving up from the Lulu up the hill into the academic quad. And as you can see, it's a completely transformed site. This has always been a very beautiful hillside. My office for many years has been, right on that hillside. And now it will be a gentler grade and then a kind of plateau here where a kind of gathering place, a place for display of art, a place for outdoor performances. And you can see in the new addition, in the tall area, the glassed-in area, Phyllis alluded to this, but something very important about this is to get the square footage we needed in Pendleton West to really make the studio program, give the studio program everything it needed, we had to take all the circulation in terms of the stairways out. So that now goes into the addition. It is glassed in so that you can actually see. It's a really exposed area where you see the campus from multiple perspectives. You come up through there into the academic quad, and you're in the world of the arts as you come into the academic quad. We're very proud of that, and it's actually a point Phyllis has made often when we've talked about this, that we aren't putting our arts facilities out in the Balkans someplace. Another politically incorrect thing to say.
Did I say that?
No, you never said that. I'll have to take credit for that one. It's not balkanized is what I mean to say. We'll use the metaphorical version. But it's really right at the center, at the heart of the campus, and very much involved with coming into the center of the college. So this is very exciting for us. You can see just on the left is going to be where, on the level that we're looking at, where the people are walking in this rendering, is the Salon, which is a replacement for a room which has currently existed in Pendleton West, and that is now really all open to studio space, and it's moved into the new addition. And directly above it is a very grand music hall, which is primarily purposed for large ensemble rehearsals, choir and orchestra. We've never had a space like this. And I mentioned the 36 years I've been here. My last few years, we will have a space for the choir and the orchestra to rehearse. That's a dedicated space. The religious life program makes it harder and harder for us to work in the chapel because they have so much going on. Now we can all thrive in our own spaces with the right facilities. And I want to turn, this is just another view of the interior lobby that will be in the new addition. And it's similar to, Phyllis showed us another slide of a different view of this lobby that's a little bit more open, but you can see on the right still is this beautiful terrace that will be there that you can come right into the lobby. So there's going to be a permeability of the indoor and outdoor area, and one of the most beautiful views to the north across to Munger Meadow. This door that's closed is on the north side, and you'll be able to come up into the building through there. And the renderings of the students there are there kind of in the doorway to the salon, which will look like this on the inside. A really fabulously beautiful space. And there's only one thing wrong with this picture, now that I'm looking at it, is that there has never been a piece written for those particular instruments. As far as I know, in the history of Western music. Because there's 2 cellos and
2 violins.
one more violin, and it could have been the Schubert quintet. But other than that, this is what it's going to look like in there. And it's acoustically tunable to a degree. It's a really high-end salon. And I want to make one point about what you can't see in this picture. It's actually 1.5 points. And then show one more slide and turn things over to Alice. And that is that this is a case where conservation and transformation go together. This is a very traditional recital room. Our students, and it's for the students. This is, we will occasionally have professional concerts in there, but this is the student space for their recitals, for their lessons, for their ensemble rehearsals. We use this all the time because there are, 30, 40 recitals alone, in addition to ensemble performances. And it's a 49-seat room. It's a perfect size for students, for those of us in the community who come to all their recitals to hear them play. And it's kind of an intimate space. It is also going to be a really fine recording facility that it's wired into the new media area. And this room that we're in, as some of us will remember, used to have there was this movable stage that you could move in and out. You can still see where the tracks were. And it was a room that could be transformed from a lecture hall to a theater very quickly. Well, this room, that we're looking at now, the Salon, will be transformable from being a salon for musical performance to a recording studio for all sorts of things that will happen across the arts. And I know that Daniela's students will be using this room for recording, and Dave Kelly and David Olson, 2 of our other colleagues, will be using this room often. So it will have that sort of transformative effect, be usable for new media. Also, it has built into the wall on the left-hand side, which you can't see, all the equipment, AV equipment you need to use it as a full classroom. And that kind of flexibility at the same time that it's very much oriented toward a specific purpose is something that we are very excited about having. Finally, a very spectacular room. One thing you need for large ensemble rehearsals is a high ceiling. And of course, architects love that. It produces a situation where you can make something very dramatic and very beautiful. And also, this room, of course, is, as you can see, lined in wood. It is slightly over 30 feet high. And it has, as you can see in there, acoustical baffling. And the little images to the right show you the wood slats and how they were inspired by the sort of wood in a piano. And it may be a little hard to see, but there's felt behind those slats, and you can change the amount of absorption in this room so that it can really be tuned and used effectively for choral and orchestral performance. But this room, too, and you can see the way the light effects, there's a lot of study of what kind of light effects we would have in here to make it actually both beautiful and have appropriate lighting for big ensembles that are in there. It's a room that it will be totally clearable so that you can have the floor completely empty. And in that sense, it's kind of like a musical equivalent of a black box theater. It can be cleared for not large, maybe 50 or 60, 70 people audience performances of small ensembles, for lectures, for experimental work and movement. It will also be a fine recording facility. And so it's a room which its primary purpose is very traditional choral and orchestral performance, but it will be used by all of us in all of the arts, and really be a space where I think the arts and the humanities can come together, and experimental work of all sorts can also happen, and a recording facility that if we ever had any spare time, we could rent out in the Boston area, because it will be one of the finest acoustical spaces for that kind of work. So, Alice.
Oh, thanks. Well, actually, why don't I go back to this beautiful slide and tell you that for about the last 5 years, we've been talking about what we wanted to do in the arts and making plans for basically the new addition and the renovation of Pendleton West, and thinking about interdisciplinarity and whatnot. And throughout that period, you know, this thing here had a presence, a sort of a looming presence. And with the notion that we really couldn't talk about Jewett because it's such an old and difficult building that anything we would do to it, including the bridge, and a lot of thought went into that bridge, would trip code, right? That we would have to make changes to the building in ways that we couldn't really even begin to comprehend in terms of the damage that they might do, like to some of our iconic spaces in Jewett. So we became aware of a grant program from the Getty Foundation called Keeping It Modern, which is intended to allow people with buildings like this one, the 1958 Jewett Art Center by Paul Rudolph, to do exactly what we needed to do, which is think through our problem, think through what we wanted to do in the future, what the building had originally been planned to achieve in terms of music, the museum, the art department, theater, you know, kind of interdisciplinarity, and of course to really study the issue of how to bring it up to current standards without sacrificing the conservation and preservation of the building while looking towards the future. So thanks to our friends in the Department of Resources and to Karen Austin, the grant writer, we got the grant thanks to John Alvarez in Facilities working closely with us, sympathetic to our problem, right? It's always much more fun to build a new building, a beautiful new building, or to do a gut renovation. In fact, although those all have their problems, this is a really tricky building, and so we've needed all the collegial, to say we work closely with our colleagues is really a hideous understatement. So thanks to Facilities, thanks to the Resources Office and the Grant Writing Office, we have embarked on this process, which has basically got 4 parts to it. One is understanding the importance of this building in its time and being able to help people understand that importance. Its cultural context, Wellesley as a client, the art department is a very important client in this building. The other thing we're really thinking hard about is what was the original idea, as I said, you know, this interdisciplinarity in the arts, and a kind of permeability, a transparency and permeability. As you know, as you walk out, you can see that the museum part at the center of this building, which had the whole of the Wellesley College Museum in it, as they also used the corridor, the doors, the side doors to music and to art all opened up fully. And so there was this sense of the intimacy and interaction with real works of art that was a part of it, as well as the interdisciplinarity. So we wanted to think about that, while at the same time creating a new vision for the arts in the 21st century that Jewett would help to facilitate, just as Pendleton West and the new addition were doing, and to actually have a complementarity with those spaces instead of being this difficult. I mean, sitting in this auditorium makes it very, very clear that, we have our work cut out for us. But we wanted to try to figure out how we could imagine the arts in the 21st century and a new vision for the arts that would be as progressive and really act as a model nationally and even internationally for preservation of 20th century buildings while at the same time looking toward the future. And then finally, one of the toughest parts is bringing in consulting architects and particularly our friend and colleague David Fixler from EYP in Boston, who's a major force in the preservation of 20th century buildings, but also very knowledgeable. So we'd have to we've been looking at materials and systems with an eye to restoring the building as best we can. And there are, of course, if you think back to the mid-50s and to the era of plastics, as we said in The Graduate, right? That plastics and all sorts of synthetic materials that are either difficult to maintain or dangerous or whatever. So I want to be quick here. So the team there's various parts of this team for the Getty Grant. And one part works on the history and the original concept, and that includes Timothy Rowan, who's a professor at UMass, who is just the expert on Paul Rudolph, our architect, and is a fellow this year at the Newhouse Center. So we're very lucky to have access to him, and my colleague Martha McNamara from the New England Arts and Architecture program, also very much involved with that phase of going to the archives and looking at these archival documents and photographs, like this one that shows one of my favorite spaces, the so-called Japanese garden, which is off the library. Very.
Got to point the other way.
Pardon? I got to show it here.
Oh, yeah.
I got a little red dot moving around.
Okay, a little red dot.
And also this landscaping, that the lawn, the continuity of the lawn that was had to be altered for the handicapped access, which of course is one of the challenges also in ADA compliance for this building. Documents like this or images like this, the current state of the building on the left and the old postcard show the parking in front of the music side, as well as this beautiful loggia, right, which is now walled in with hedge. And that, if I had my way, that'll be one of the first things to go. I hate that hedge. Because Rudolph intended both the quad side and the side which is now the Plaza of the Davis to be like an Italian city, to have an openness, and you can see there's a beautiful kind of plaza and a modern landscaping scheme in this drawing by Rudolph's office. And other schemes from Rudolph's office actually have the Jewett side look more and more like the Doge's Palace in Venice, right? He was, what's interesting about this phase of Rudolph's career is that he was into the notion that modern architecture was going to change everything and never look back. Started creeping back the idea that history really was important and that modern architecture, especially on a campus like Wellesley's, which is so historically oriented, would have to respond to and talk to the older buildings on campus. So here's Rudolph thinking about the Doge's Palace and in dialogue with Green and Founders, which is in Pendleton, which is obviously critical to it. Then there are these wonderful drawings. I won't show you too many more of them. This is a truly weird one. I brought this from Marty because he had asked about this spiral staircase, which was up there somewhere, and took you from the dressing rooms up behind there. It's all kinds of weird spaces that no one except a handful of students know about that are there. But here's Rudolph thinking about works of art accessible visually in this kind of permeable spaces, and the intimacy with works of art that are right there, but also the freedom of spatial freedom that's an incredible aspect of this building. There, over at Archives, we found beautiful drawings like this one, which not only, I think, emphasizes this issue of dialogue with the Galen Stone Tower and the texture and the feel of brick and the loggia on the right-hand side and the passageway up the hill. It really shows Rudolph working very closely with our landscape and understanding, Wellesley's landscape very, very well. On our team also, we have my colleague to the left here, Marty Brody, who has, with Phyllis and all of us really, been an important part of the discussions about Pendleton and the new edition and interdisciplinarity, the arts in the 21st century. And Marty is on the Getty team and has been coordinating focus groups to talk about our program for Jewett. And in particular, this is the main corridor, the ways in which we can preserve and enhance both that sense of freedom that the building, I think, was designed around, and the notion of intimacy. We have all sorts of problems of security, obviously, with real works of art now that have been moved into the Davis, and these are works from Wellesley's collection, which students would have, been able to sit and look at and walk by. When we first started, you had to walk through the corridor, and therefore you would see the same drawing or print, for 3 months at a time, let's say, and develop a real familiarity with it. And so these key spaces, like the corridor, I'll show you in a second the main gallery, like this sculpture court, which of course was also, and here's another problem, that it has no railing on the side. Rudolph liked you to have a slightly anxious feeling when you walked around buildings so that you would be fully aware of your surroundings at all times, but that doesn't really fit with current notions of safety very well.
I would have been the first one falling there.
Say it again?
I would have been the first one falling there.
Exactly. And you can see that in between the railings it's open as well. We had to put glass parapets, glass in between those railings also for compliance. So we're going to have, it's much more beautiful in this image than it is now, but we're going to have to figure out how to try to conserve the building fabric, think about the future, and try to get back to some of this intensity, I think, of contact. Students going up to the lecture halls on the top floor, to the studios, now and in the past, pass by works of art. You could sit and chat in the benches. I have one of those benches outside my office now. But you could also, this is where we taught the Art 100 and 215 conferences. And as you know, it's a very beautiful, intimate space. There's another view of it showing the staircase. I particularly love this because it shows the mosaic. And I think one of the ideas we've had is making a photo print on vinyl or something like that, and literally putting the mosaic back in the middle of the space. It's hanging on the wall. I don't know what's going to happen to it. They're working on figuring out what to do in the Davis with it, reinstalling it as part of their reinstallation. Students going up the stairs would have gone past these real things to look at photos when they were cramming for exams. So that's another wonderful juxtaposition, I think. Also, ashtrays. We used to smoke in this building. And then this was the museum at the center where we now have the Media Lab and the Jewett Gallery and a painting studio. And we want to think about not only the openness of this space, but the way in which it functioned. It's a bridge, as you know, from walking under it. It can't be loaded very much with heavy things because it's a bridge. But that's another one of our constraints. It's a fascinating project to think about what's there, what these incredibly interesting, smart faculty and staff did in the late 40s and 50s, and the Jewett and Greer families did to think about the arts in the middle of the 20th century, and then their commitment, to this quirky, interesting building with all sorts of wonderful details. Those are, as all of you know, the most treacherous steps in the winter. Again, I think Rudolph taking you beyond awareness into, full-on anxiety about slipping. So as we're working through this, keeping it modern, Grant, obviously our goal is to keep it modern, but really also to keep it Wellesley, right? To keep it very much in the spirit of this progressive, enabling, I think, brilliant program that we're trying to recapture and recreate with new media, new technologies. And hopefully will live up to the expectations of the Getty, which has confidence in us with this grant to be a model for 20th century preservation for not just the rest of the country, but hopefully, their scope is international as well. So there's lots here, but we're happy to answer questions. Sorry, I went on a little bit longer. If you want, I can give a whole lecture for an hour or two. I teach 2 hours and 20 minutes now, as some people know. That's basically the length of time I need to get even to say good morning, as some people say. Are there questions for any of us? Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting that your take on Jewett was that it caused arts anxiety or something like that.
Well, Rudolph wanted you not only to have choices, he was very interested in Mannerist, 16th century architecture, but in other projects as well, there's often this sort of destabilization that works against a kind of complacency, let's say it that way.
Well, I can just tell you, as a student, I thought it was a really welcoming place, and I actually was an English major, but I did all my studying in the music library because I liked it so much.
It's beautiful.
And I did love art. I got kind of scared off by the professor, to tell you the truth. The building itself was very welcoming to me, more than my professor. I would have liked to have been an art major.
Well, I think, I think that openness of the building, the permeability, the fact that you could come in it and study in the music library with all its beautiful windows and its beautiful light, and it's going to, we're going to continue that, obviously. That.
No, I just speaking up, I didn't feel like anxious in there. I felt comfortable.
But you were very much aware, I hope.
I guess, I don't know, I had read for that music library.
Well, when you came, you probably came across the academic quad.
Yeah.
One of the
Well, I love the coming up and under, too. I always love that.
Well, see, one of the interesting things, because this room is still used for a lot of public events, is I think for people who are not familiar with the campus, the up and under actually is mysterious until you get used to it. So we have a lot of, when we have guests from outside, especially now that we have parking garage and the kind of movement into the center of the campus that happens, the orientation around is interesting. So I think one of the things, many things we have to think about is how we point out how to get from one place to another. And I think also the addition that's being built now is really going to help clarify everything about that. And you're going to be able to, when you come up, that arts passageway we were showing is also going to really help move you into the academic quad, I think, in a clear way if you are not familiar with the campus.
Right on this side. That way. So this used to be you know, obviously the main passageway. But what Marty's right, this is, as many things are on campus, you know, there's a sort of insider knowledge about how to get around that doesn't, you know, help us when we have guests from outside.
It's a long way around that way.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how some of the design elements in the Jewett Center influenced the addition.
Phil? That's you.
Well, I think she's wondering how some of the design decisions in Pendleton West were influenced by the Jewett. And I think there was a real sense of trying to honor the Jewett. I think a truth to materials is a very big factor. We don't have images to show you right here, but the decisions about the materials, the concrete of the outside of the addition, the choice of the stone and wood is very much tied to thinking about it as declaring its own time, but with a nod towards the modernist jewel next door. So, and we were very careful in the selection of the architect to find someone that we thought really did understand modernist architecture, and Rudolph in particular, as well as the older building. So, you know, the Pendleton West building has many attributes that are specific to it, but it's not a modernist jewel in the same kind of way. So inside, in the studio production spaces, it's very stripped down. We're really asking it to act like an instrument. So we're exposing a lot of the concrete, you know, and the pillars and whatnot. So it's going to be very bare bones inside, and then those public spaces, I think, are going to be very beautifully rendered in their textures and surfaces. And the transition across to Jewett is understood in that way. The passageway, as Marty talked about, I think here there are many features here that speak, you know, next door to Jewett, and then and looking at Pendleton in kind of a fresh way in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, if I may add to that, I think one of the beautiful things that they did, and I think it's one of the things that I love most about the project, is that bridge that students used to love, and it was our main exhibition space. I don't know, everybody wanted to show pieces there. Was this like kind of connecting, you know, like connecting feature in between the two buildings and in between the different things that were going on. And I think now we're going to have this addition there that is going to become like this kind of integrating force, right, in between everything. And I just love that the fluidity that's going to start to happen. And I think one of the things that, I mean, I've been here for, I think, 7 years, wow. But one of the things I love about Jewett was that a certain amount of fluidity within the building and the unexpected constantly happening where you were forced to make decisions. And I think that's maybe like the sort of like an anxiety producing thing. Like you're not just directed to different places, you can actually make your way through it. I think that's also going to be present in the new building. That sort of fluidity and that kind of empowering thing that where you can actually breach things but also make decisions while you move through spaces.
The image that we saw of the Arts Passage was a very early one from the outside Arts Passage. And one thing that doesn't show is that as you go up the stairs, which are more practical and have a handrail and also allow you to go in and use an elevator, was also present is that funny little staircase that's got the angles that you go up, you know, that one person and not with an umbrella can walk up. That's become a very heavily used staircase, and it stays. It's actually over there right now, and it will be next door to that. So there's a real sense of those different times being put side by side, and that, I think, you know, thanks to Alice and Martha working together very closely.
Well, and John for helping us get that to stay.
Yeah, those are the kind of details that I think are going to become maybe afresh in a new way, that it was a side element before, and now it's going to have a new kind of voice to speak in that way. So, it's a good question. It's a constant act.
Well, because of course, it's irrational to keep something weird like that. But that's the nature of the original building and also the quirkiness of our campus. So we kept it, even though it was expensive. Yes, ma'am.
Point out the stairs. I think
In this picture?
yeah, keeping the two stairs is all.
Yeah, it's not
It's
in
hard-
this image so much.
It's hard to see.
But it would be,
gonna
it'd be
be,
right up, oh, it's
right-
over to that side.
right
Yeah,
there.
there it is, right kind of behind the,
There's a fat one and a skinny one.
Yeah.
We're calling them
Yeah.
Gertrude and Alice.
yeah. We might be able to see it on one of the floor plans, so. if we go to a
One
floor
of
plan.
your floor plans. Really? Oops, sorry. Oh, back. Sorry, everybody. Oops.
There we can see there. So
right.
if we look to the left of the arrow,
yeah.
we see those two staircases. One is a bigger one, and then that little narrow one, it looks like those stairs are perpendicular there, but they're not, right? If you walk those stairs, you know they're at
Here.
that funny angle right there, yeah.
These guys.
Yeah, so that's going to be a very beautiful
So
conversation.
Gertrude and Alice.
Yeah.
Just a couple of logistical questions. I was just wondering, since you're going to be probably having all kinds of heavy equipment in the building, is there going to be a freight elevator available?
There's one elevator.
Sorry.
It's going to handle pianos, so we're hoping it handles other heavy things too, like the presses. We're not moving the presses until that elevator's done.
And then the performance spaces, will there also be doors set up like double doors such as we have here to make sure that no sound permeates from as people enter, especially latecomers, things like that?
Yes, all the sound blocks are double doored, and you know that's really important because there's we want to have certain places where people are going to want to come in, and other places where they can but are not going to be oriented toward doing that. But they're all double doors.
That's another piece of the puzzle, is to figure out. I can't tell you how many things I've learned about the storage of musical instruments through this process, but having the bridge and storing some piece of equipment and instruments on one side and being able to move them across and up and down is, you know, a logistical challenge.
And even the sound of the doors, you know, when we went with our architects to look at Dartmouth's new studio building, we were all listening to those doors because how many times have we listened to a bang of a door that, you know, interrupted something? I mean, when Daniela showed that one piece and I heard the sound, I wondered if some of those sounds were from Pendleton West. We listened to the banging pipes and everything, and you know, we had all kinds of ambient sounds that we grew used to, but it's going to be very different in that way, and much more sensitive to sound now.
Okay.
Well,
It's time.
thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.